So this is a test of a arc welding or stick welding aluminum welding rod. They're Blue Demon. They're specifically for stick welding aluminum. I guess they're kind of a trouble rod when you're out in the field and you can't use a TIG. Anyway, I bought these for a specific project that I'm having trouble trying to TIG weld, and you'll see why I'm having trouble with it shortly. But right now, I'm going to test these rods to see if I can make them work for me. This is just 2 sheets of 1/8 inch 6061 aluminum, and I'm going to preheat it to a couple hundred degrees just to get a good start. Some of the videos I watched online, preheating is essential for using these rods. One thing I noticed about this is the flux that this thing generates. The slag is nasty, sticky stuff. It's hard to come off. And if you break the arc, you need to clean the tip of that rod off again, because it reflows over the end and makes a very effective insulator. Makes it hard to restart. Now I'm welding at 80 amps on this 1/8 inch sheet. Seems to be a little hot, but it worked okay. It didn't weld too bad. It's if you looked at the weld, it's kind of nasty looking. You could never say this was done with a TIG. But if you needed to stick a pieces of aluminum together in the field somewhere, and this was your option, this is a perfectly good option. So the camera angle is not good. Aluminum's kind of hard to visualize anyway. So I'm gonna try it again with another rod. Now you see I got about 5 inches of welded surface there on this lap joint with one rod. You got to feed these rods really fast. They consume fast when you're welding. Now I reduced the current down to 70 amps. And it seems to be working okay. The plate's still hot. And yeah, I need to get a better camera, video camera, for if I'm going to do any kind of welding videos, because this is just watching flashing lights. You can't really see anything. I can tell you that when you're pushing that rod into the puddle, you can't see anything. It's just a molten mess of smoke and liquid flux in there. It's just, there's no way to see what the weld puddle looks like. Anyway, the slag is a little difficult to get off, but it actually comes off reasonably well. And I'll give you a close-up here of this weld. Now this came out much better. I think I can use these rods for what I want to work on. Like I said, it's not TIG quality, but it's not bad. It's a good strong weld, and I'm happy that it worked out so well, because I was a little hesitant. But like I said, I was having trouble welding this project with a TIG. I'll explain why. This is an old lamppost. It's made out of an assortment of aluminum things, probably tin cans or soda cans, aluminum foil, aluminum pans. Who knows what kind of crap they made this thing out of. Anyway, they cast this thing in individual panels, and then they welded them together. It looks like they used a spool gun. If you look inside, if you could see inside there, it's as nasty a weld as you can get. Anyway, this is broke here, and you can see this is really nasty, grainy cast aluminum. So I'm going to try the old technique of putting a bevel on it and see if I can fill that in with these rods. Now I bumped this is varying thickness. This is from 1/4 inch to close to 1/2 inch in spots. So it's a little tricky to weld. There's no uniformity to it. So I'm gonna preheat this thing, and I'm gonna try to get it up to 250 or 300 degrees. That's an awful lot of aluminum to heat up, but we'll see how that goes. I'm just using a MAP gas torch, and gonna hope for the best. I tried welding this with a TIG, and there is so much detritus inside this casting that you'll be welding along and you'll be getting a good bead going, a good puddle, and then it'll explode on you. And you'll clear that out and you'll be welding again, get the good puddle, and it'll explode on you. And all I can think of is there's just debris inside the casting itself in the aluminum. So I don't know what, like I said, I don't know what they made out of. Of course, it's not some exotic fine alloy. It's just scrap aluminum that's been remelted. And this base here you're looking at is actually 4 panels. And it's pretty clever the way they did it. There's 4 identical panels, and then they just position them and weld them together. And one of the tricks they did to make this thing look pretty is they filled all the seams with Bondo. They skim coated the surface with Bondo, and you'll see that later in later in the weld in this video. Made it monster to try to weld. So the outside is all skim coated with Bondo, and it's pitted and pot marked. So I thought my best chance would be to weld it from the inside. Like I said, I'm running at 90 amps, and it's biting in good. I'm getting good penetration. It's a little awkward trying to weld inside this thing. You really got to weld by feel because you can't see. And it really wouldn't matter if you could see, because when you're welding with these rods, you can't see what you're doing anyway. You just got to shove the rod into the puddle and just bury it. And then, of course, it still blows out. I got a couple of blowouts while I was welding. It would just erupt and spit back at me. So, anyway, you can see right there in that little picture, there's a hole right there. Something was in there and just blew out. But I managed to get a reasonable weld, and I'm comfortable with it. Now this is the base, and this is all made up panels. Anyway, when this thing fell over, it busted the corner off, and then it also busted the tower off. You'll see that in a second. Now, if you look at this, you can see there's inconsistency in the thickness of this casting. The thickest part there is a little over 3/8, and the thinnest part is just a little under 1/4. So it's going to be a booger to weld, and it was. First I tried to wire brush it, and that didn't work out, so I just used an abrasive pad. Now I didn't put a V-notch in it because I absolutely needed that cracked edge to realign precisely so I could put this back together properly. So there's no V. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the rods. I'm going to tack it together, and then I'm going to go around and put a root pass, and then I'm going to go ahead and put a second pass on it, and I think it'll be all right. The trick here is to make sure it's dead straight and lined up so that when I get to doing the full weld, it'll go together nicely. Now I wasn't able to get this to 300 degrees, but close. There's just too much mass there with that torch. Now this column you're looking at is actually made up of more than one piece. It's a clamshell, and again they must have welded it, tack welded it on the inside, and then used Bondo to seal the seams. And I don't know what kind of paint they used on it, but you see me use the torch on there and hardly affected it. Of course, most of the heat was absorbed by the aluminum substrate, but it was definitely good paint. Here I'm getting the last of the tacks on it. I managed to get 4 decent tacks all around it. It's kind of hard to see. Like I said, I need to get a better welding camera. But the shiny part there is a good, deep, penetrating tack. Now this lamppost probably weighs 75 pounds. So when I tip it, and it's 9 feet tall. So when I tip this thing over, it's just got a hole. There's kind of a close-up of that. You can see the weld beads just popping off that thing. So here I've laid it on the side, and I'm just going to go around as far as I can. Then I'm going to rotate the base and just do a rinse and repeat. Now here's where one of the problems came into. The thicker parts are easy; they take the heat just fine. But then you'll get a blowout because you come across a thin wall area. But for the most part, I got a pretty good pass on it. I'm pretty happy with it. Now the gaps you can see there, that's just the slag. It's got to come off. But I got good penetration. I think it's going to be pretty strong. And just filling one more gap. Now with these rods, if you don't get a good arc started and established, and you don't maintain it, you have to clean you off your area because that flux just coats and insulates terribly. So you got to clean the tip of that rod off and clean your work area off. Now you see I got a blowout there, so I'll just clean it out, get the slag out of the way, clean the rod, and just keep going over and over until I get it. Now I turned the audio off because I actually had the TV running out in my shop, and I'm sure you didn't want to listen to the news while I was doing this. I just got lost in what I was doing and didn't think to turn the silly thing off. Anyway, I took and made 2 passes around this. So, I mean, this is not high art. So, once I took a file to it, a nice round file, and cleaned it out, it looked pretty good. And once it's touched up with paint, or you could use a little bit of Bondo in there if you really want to smooth it out, nobody will ever notice it's been welded back together. Because if what you're looking at right now has got Bondo everywhere on it. See, there's a little bit of a hole and there's some slag. I'll take care of that. There we go. There's the other hole. Now here's the seam you can see. You know, I'll come back to that. What I'm doing is this column is a clamshell arrangement. And they've undoubtedly welded it top and bottom and then filled in the gap with Bondo before they sanded and painted. And there's a hole, but here's the seam. You can see that seam. And the pink, if you look at the upper left corner there of that seam, the left side of the seam, that pink is pink Bondo. It's everywhere. But I did manage to get it stuck together. So I'm going to put one more pass. I'm going to clean this out and put one more pass around this, and then clean up all the little BBs, and then take a round file to it and kind of smooth it down and make it look presentable. And then they can do the paint touch-up, whatever they want to do with it. But look at the BBs on that thing. It really spits them out. Now here's a good example of what I was fighting on everywhere else. This is why I didn't weld this base on the outside. Can you see the Bondo in the seam there? And then you can see the Bondo in the surface. They skim coated it and sanded it to make it look smooth. Pretty rough castings. Anyway, there's the lamppost. It's 9 foot tall as you see it. Not including the hat and whatever else.
No, don't put your fingers in front of it, honey. All right, hit stop. All right, hit stop.